Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hey everybody, it's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. This is the only podcast where I have covered every episode of the Sunbow cartoon, the DIC, even the Extreme, and every issue of the Marvel Real American Hero comic book, page by page, panel by panel. We did it all, and now it's another edition of You on Joe. You, listener, the G.I. Joe fan, you love the greatest American fighting force of all time. Well, guess what? You are the star of the show. That's what I want You on Joe to be. Who is your specific favorite G.I. Joe? What's your favorite episode of G.I. Joe? What's your favorite comic book of G.I. Joe? Some of you love cartoons, comics, toys, whatever it is, whatever minutia you want to talk about. That's what we're doing on You on Joe. So if you want to participate and be a guest, please, please, please reach out to me on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Joe on Joe Pod. Or you can send me an email to joeonjoepod@gmail.com and just let me know what topic you want to cover. If you're not sure what topic, I'll help you winnow it down to something very specific. More specific, the better. Now, while you're online, you can please give me a rate and review on your podcast app. Every single review you give helps grow the show. If you're so inclined, you can also visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/joeandjoepod, and you can help keep this show afloat. And you can also give some love to our great sponsors, the Movies and a Meal podcast. In the beginning of time, the smallest organism gained sentience and thought to itself, I really need a good meal. Then, a bunch of other stuff happened, and finally the Lumiere brothers started showing movies in France. This was all the inspiration that fellow broadcasters Brad, Keith, and Ben needed to combine these two primal needs into the Movies and a Meal podcast. The Movies and a Meal is one of the most casual and relaxing film talk podcasts you could ever listen to. These three friends enjoy a good meal together while talking all about the movies. And not just reviews, they do favorite lists, comparison discussions, genre talks, anything and everything that you can think of. They've even broken their solemn promise inherent in the name and branched out into TV talk. So I love the variety of films they bring to the table. They cover new releases, classics, cult films, often in one episode. It's really a delight to listen to, and it has something for every movie fan out there to enjoy. So if you're looking to grow your podcast library, if you eat meals, and if you've ever seen a movie, then you should give Ben, Keith, and Brad a listen and subscribe to the Movies and a Meal podcast. They've been a great sponsor to this show. I love the Movies and a Meal podcast, and I'd like all of you to love them too. Now, apparently, I'm on a Kickstarter streak because this is the third week in a row we have yet another amazing G.I. Joe Kickstarter to talk about. And this time it is with an author that I know many of you are already familiar with. That's Dan Klingensmith Jr. of the Creating G.I. Joe line of reference books. He is currently in the very tail end of his 11th volume for Creating G.I. Joe. That is right. You heard me. He has done 11 volumes of Creating G.I. Joe, and it is about time that we had him here on Joe on Joe. Friend of the show, Adrian McCarthy, turned me on to Dan's work, and I cannot wait to get my hands on some of his books. These are the officially sanctioned by Hasbro reference books of the behind-the-scenes moments that went into building the line of 3 3/4 soldiers that we all know and love. Dan has done a fantastic job explaining all the parts that went into making G.I. Joe in these books. He's covered marketing, he's covered design, he's covered production, writing dossiers. Like, he's literally gone behind the scenes. And in our conversation today, he talks in depth about what each volume contains, so that it's going to definitely interest you to head on over to Kickstarter and check that out. When this episode drops, which is Wednesday, April 12th, his Kickstarter only has just a couple more days left in its current for the 11th volume. So go to Kickstarter, search for Creating G.I. Joe by Dan Klingensmith Jr., learn more, back it, get your copies of the 11th volume. They also have some of his Kickstarter tiers. You can get all the volumes, and actually that's at a discount than if you were to buy it off his site, etc., and so on and so forth. We talk about all that on today's episode, and it's great. But you know what? This is not Joe on Kickstarter, as much as these last few weeks have proven. It is You on Joe. So that means that we dug into Dan's favorite Joe character of all time. It's one of his original personal figures, the greatest duo in all of G.I. Joe. We're talking about Mutt and Junkyard. We all have a spot for Mutt and Junk. You cannot deny the greatness of that action figure. And Dan and I, we break down the original 4 O-ring versions of these of this duo, this canine duo. We talk about color schemes, the sub-teams they were on, why his accessories are amongst the best in the game. And along the way, Dan drops a whole lot of tantalizing behind-the-scenes info that you can only find in his Creating G.I. Joe books. So whether you're a dog lover like me, or you're just a lover of one of the greatest action figure duos of all time, you're going to enjoy today's episode. So sit back, strap it down, and enjoy my conversation with Dan Klingensmith Jr., talking all about Mutt. Wait, no, he's Mutt. The dog's Junkyard. That's right. Get that straight. We're talking Mutt and Junkyard today on You on Joe. Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I go on a fair amount of tangents on the show too. So, don't be surprised if we end up starting talking about Mutt and Junkyard and end up in a deep conversation about charbroil.
No worries. That works.
Man. So Dan Klingensmith Jr., tell me, you're doing Creating G.I. Joe, which is, at this point, I think it's easy to call it an epic collection of source books about G.I. Joe, about literally creating G.I. Joe, about the early images, about all that stuff. Dan, how long have you been doing this?
Well, the books themselves, I want to say the first one was 2015, if I recollect well or good, correctly, I should say. Started the project, so a little bit of background before that, we're actually publishing. I technically started back in 2008 and 9, I think 2009.
Uh-huh.
I'd read an interview with Ron Rudat on yojo.com, and just something stuck out about what he said in regards to kind of the credit of the team. He just said a lot of other departments got a lot of credit. And so, working in an environment, my normal job where it's a very team oriented environment, I realized it'd be kind of neat to see what I can do to recognize him and others, whether it be the design department or others, because I'm sure others felt the same way. So I really started with the designers initially and building relationships with them and reaching out. Some were on board right away, some were not. Mm-hmm. And then, with marketers, and then it just grew from there. So really the book, I really try to talk to people in all the different departments, whether it be marketing, R&D, engineering, and then you even have the branches off of that, not just your, concept designers, but model makers, sculptors, different type of engineers, you name it. I've tried to touch upon it in the book series itself, which I can get into later, when we talk about it.
Sure. So. I mean, that's really, really great. And right now you're on Kickstarter for as of this recording, you only got about 5 or 6 days left. So this episode will drop tomorrow morning, first thing. So listeners, awesome. I hope you're hearing this in the first 4 to 5 days so you can jump on it. But it's on Kickstarter. It's Creating G.I. Joe, Dan Klingensmith Jr. I was really impressed when your project itself was brought to my attention by a friend of the show, Adrian McCarthy, Adrian, if you're listening, we interviewed Adrian weeks and weeks and weeks ago, but we've had all these Kickstarters get in the way with timing issues. So Adrian, your episode is coming up. You're coming up next. So listeners, if you hear him talk about this Kickstarter in arrears, that's why. I'm sure he's okay with me bumping him. It's kind of like Matt Damon on the Jimmy Kimmel show. Once again, Adrian McCarthy. we had to bump him for time. But Adrian brought this to my attention, and you've done 11. This is your 11th volume of this.
It's 11th book.
Yeah, when you look at the galleys of them, which you can see online, and that's at steelcitypublishing.com. Mm-hmm. That's your home base for this book. The galleys creatinggijoe.com. You should be able to find it. Oh, great. The galleys look great, and what I can see in them is it is all that what you're talking about, those other departments. And it's the real artwork. It's the actual design work. It's the concepts. It's the making of stuff. It's like it's as legitimate a sourced by Hasbro book that I can see anyone's done. As far as the origins of this stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit it right on the head as far as, it's really to showcase what we never got to see. We see the package art, we read the file cards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, we get what we get, right? And this is really to take a behind the scenes look and learn about, from the designer's point of view, why did you do these things? What inspired this vehicle, or what inspired this character? A lot of these guys were, back then they were using just books. They have still, some of them still have libraries of books. And I'm just like, what am I going to do with this?
Right.
Because they didn't have the internet at their fingertips back then, of course. So, but so they pulled things out of books and different resources, museums. They visit museums and pull ideas from there. So
Amazing.
it's been really fun learning that. And with Hasbro, I mean, it is an officially licensed book, which is awesome.
That's really impressive. That I was just going to mention that. That's really cool. And
so they've been really supportive with it. So
yeah, and you do interviews with the characters, right? It's not just presenting their work, right? They give commentary, they give background stories, things like that.
Yeah, so I've interviewed, I want to say maybe one designer, on all the different vehicles and figures that have come out over the years. So, I really try to touch upon that as far as the design element part of it. Then I, dig and go further with, maybe any funny stories that maybe a marketer would have regarding a product or regarding a character or an engineer. Some of these guys will talk about some of the challenges they had, from an engineering standpoint. So I think the Hiss tank, there's a gentleman by the name of Joe Marone who talks a little about that from an engineering standpoint. And then also in the beginning of the book. So the beginning of the books, if you are okay with me sharing this.
Please.
The first four books really cover the history of the Joe brand, which was written by Kirk Mazigian. So that the first four books, the beginning of the book, that's kind of the premise and what's discussed. Okay. Then you enter what I call the gallery of design, which is probably what you're talking about as far as the folds and the pages of all the characters and vehicles. And then once I get into volume 5, I then dig into the process of how things were done back then. So I talk about the figure design in volume 5. And then I talk about the sculpting process in number 6. And then I go back to the vehicle design in number 7. Number 8, I believe, is the model making as far as how things were made. And, for those of people who may not know, back then, a lot of the models, the patterns for these vehicles were done in wood, which is amazing to me that they used to, it's crazy. I mean, when you read it and you see the details that went into it, it's amazing that was being done at that time. So those gentlemen and men and women who worked on, pattern making really had really great skills as far as their hands.
What kind of scale were they working on in doing 3 3/4 inches in wood?
Generally I think is 1-to-1. There were some things done that were done 2-to-1 if it required a lot of detail, is from what I was told. Figure wise,
very impressive.
2-to-1. So most of all the figures that I'm aware of, until like the 90s, when they would sometimes reuse a certain part or whatever, most of the figures were done 2-to-1, and that was to capture the detail. So then they would pantograph it down to 1-to-1, and that's what we get now. So then number 8 covers that as far as the model shop and stuff. And then number 9, I dip into some of the marketing piece, because marketing was one of those things that's it's there from the beginning, but it's hard to figure out how to explain it with the process. So now it's kind of coming back around a full circle. We talk a little bit about the packaging design. And then number 10, which was released at the same time, that talks about the packaging as well. So actually now I'm retracting back. I'm trying to remember 9 and 10. And number 9 and 8.
You got a lot of volumes.
There's a lot.
I get it. It's a lot. Yeah, I definitely get it.
There's a lot.
No, don't worry about keeping track of that. How many are planned for this? So you're on 11 now. It's Kickstarter, as you're listening, is only got a couple days away. Go to Kickstarter.com. Creating G.I. Joe with Dan Klingensmith. What's the end game for it?
It's about 3 more. What I recently just came up with. Well, it's kind of grown as a series because originally it was going to be 8.
Mm-hmm.
And then as time goes on and you gather new material and more people jump on board, kind of grew to like, I knew I was going to do maybe 10 to 12. I was kind of on that brink. And then this past, probably the last 2 or 3 months, I was just cranking out at least general layouts, right? Just to have an idea, like, where am I going to finish, to your point? And I was thinking 13 for a while. For a long time, I was thinking 13. But then when I was all said and done about a month ago, I just realized, oh man, like I have probably enough to do 14. So I'm going to try to do as much as I can. The last book is going to focus on unproduced concepts. So it's going to be a little bit different than the norm when it comes to the series, because the series covers 82 to 94 per volume as much as I can.
Mm-hmm.
I think this upcoming volume, not 11, but number 12, I think I've already featured all the 82 characters. So I start out a little bit later. I think it's 83, 84 with a vehicle. I think it's going to be Thunder and Slugger. But majority of the books covers, I try to capture 82 to 94 within each book. I try.
Yeah,
that's the goal.
that was going to be my next point. I do like what you're doing, and I was looking at on the Kickstarter page. I'm looking at the table of contents that you have listed, like which characters are going to be in volume 11, and I like it because you've got a little bit from 82, a little bit from 84, 85. So there's a smattering. So whatever era of Joe is your favorite era, I know some people come in there, late 80s, early 90s. Some of us old heads are there from the beginning. I like that.
Exactly.
I like that you've gotten it broken out this way, because there's a lot. I mean, I've been doing this for 7 years. Yikes! There's a ton of stuff about what I consider the older Joes, and that's like, for me, it's 89 and forward. That I don't know about because I wasn't collecting at the time, and my tastes tend to lean towards the stuff I was already familiar with. So I'm really enjoying learning about all that extra stuff, and there's just so much of it. There's always more to learn. So I appreciate a book like this. I appreciate all this data. It's really,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's really good looking.
Thank you.
You know what?
I appreciate that.
Dan, the thing is, we're talking Kickstarter, we're talking Creating G.I. Joe, but this show is called You on Joe.
Mm-hmm.
And it is about your favorite thing. And the first thing that you gave to me when I said, all right, Dan, we'll get on here. We'll get some interviews going. What's your favorite show? You gave me the answer, Mutt and Junkyard.
Oh, yeah.
I love it. Absolute favorites. I love Mutt and Junkyard. I don't know anyone who doesn't love Mutt and Junkyard. What about Mutt and Junk spoke to you when you were young?
Well, he was one of my 3 first characters. I think I was probably drawn into G.I. Joe most likely, from what I recall, through the cartoon, like many of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I saw him in an episode, and I've always been drawn, before I became like a collector. I was always drawn towards the characters with the animals. I don't know why. I just thought it was always kind of a neat thing that G.I. Joe did. It was a unique thing to G.I. Joe.
You're not alone.
And so I, just having a Rottweiler dog, I've always loved Rottweilers since I was a kid. Mutt himself is it's a cool sculpt. I would love to find, I wish that the original painting I don't know if it exists, and if it is, it's most likely painted over with the Marauders colors, unfortunately. But I would love to find a paint master of Mutt. I mean, that would be awesome find and something to add to the collection. But yeah, he's just a cool character.
He really is. He really has a great look. And, he came in 84. So that was, it was that early era where you're still thinking of G.I. Joe as solid green. And here he comes with, he's got red, he's got brown. He's got a different, he's one of the crew that really had a different look in that year. And obviously the amazing dog. I think
just the package art.
Yeah, the package art, everything's great. And the fact that you have the human wearing the dog muzzle says so much about the character, which is always amusing to a kid and always catches your, gets your imagination, which of course they play up on the show with him constantly saying, no, I'm Mutt, he's Junkyard, like that whole name problem they ever had. I really,
I mean, it just speaks to me, like, I'm looking at the package art right now, and the gun's straight at you, the dog's coming at you. It's one of those. When you look at some of the Joe stuff, I mean, there's of course other characters that jump off the packaging essentially, but he's just one, that just comes off. And then, like you said, the play on words and the names was always, I think, humorous as a kid. When you're a kid.
Well,
those
also
things.
the one arm with the dog glove, I guess dog hammer, whatever that would be called. That also is really interesting too, because it's it sets up something different, and it just sets him apart from everyone else. He's got great accessories. It's got the baton, submachine gun, a nightstick, and a leash. Stop it.
I mean, it's just a great character, and again, a favorite of mine, and just the colors, the deco, like you said, and interestingly enough, the gentleman, I forget what his name is on the file card, but he's actually named after a former Hasbro person,
Stanley R. Perlmutter.
So the last name is based on a gentleman who used to be an art director at Hasbro. So
cool.
There is a connection there which is true for a lot of characters. Whether it be their face or names.
Yeah, Dusty's I think the most famous one, right?
Yeah, with Ron and then Leatherneck looking like Ron. So you see that throughout the line. There's a lot of characters that were based on Hasbro, former Hasbro employees. So, and then with Mutt, I mean, within the book or within the series, I'll share this little tidbit of information. So Mutt was originally designed to be a Cobra.
What?
So, yep, he's originally a Cobra character. And so if you look at my book, you'll see different color studies, and you'll see more Cobra colors originally. And I think I shared out that page with you.
You
so
did.
If you're looking at that,
kind of got a Crimson Guard feel to him.
A little bit, and then like that blue, that royal blue kind of. And so eventually, I can't remember. I think he has his mask on in those Cobra ones. And then he became a Joe, just a change as far as someone made a decision to make him a G.I. Joe, which that happened often. There's plenty of vehicles and characters that went kind of back and forth as far as, well, it was originally designed to be this, but it went to the other side. But yeah, so that's one interesting thing about him that I love is just the fact that, he was a Cobra, became a Joe, wasn't technically a Cobra, I should say, like Mercer, but, design wise, he was a Cobra.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see him in some of those Cobra colors. It'd be fun to see him.
It would be, yeah. That gives him a little bit of an edge too.
Yeah.
From a design perspective, if you think about it, the idea of you're crafting something you think's for Cobra, you're going to put some more menacing, harder, Cobra-esque design flair to it.
Yeah.
And then you flip him, make him a Joe, so he just stands out a little more. Yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly. So, and it was a Rottweiler. Sounds Cobra.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I saw. Well, he was originally supposed to be called Dogface, right?
I'm trying to remember what I have on there. There's a couple names. There's alternate names that I list on the book.
Yeah.
That are pulled directly from Larry Hama's dossiers. So I have Xerox copies of Larry's dossiers. And that's another thing I'll feature in there. Alternate names, and then I comb through the dossier. Significant difference between what Larry originally wrote and then what was actually released. I try to point that out within the series as well. So that's some other information that's kind of sprinkled throughout the books as well.
Oh, that's great. So, and did you get that information? Like, do you get that direct from Larry, or does that come secondhand from Hasbro, or how does that work?
That was actually from a collector who Larry had sent him, because I still have the little FedEx thing from Larry to him. To where he had shared it with me, and he had Xerox copies of a lot of the dossiers from him. But I also have acquired some original dossiers, not in a sense, I don't know if I have any not pencil, we weren't done pencil, but I don't know if I have any originally typed up ones, but I do have some that were handed over to marketing, like Kirk Bazigian, and there's scratch marks all over it. There'd be things he'd add to it or erase or cross out and make changes. So it's kind of fun to see that as well. And I do feature, I think, a few of those in one of the books. I think that's in number 10. because I do talk about the packaging and then I talk about the file card.
Sure, sure.
So
Now, Mutt's had a lot of different versions over the years. Before we get into those different versions, from what I can see, Junkyard's always the same mold. Am I right?
I believe so. Yeah, I think they maybe do a spray op. I think the Marauder version, which I don't have in front of me. Oh, actually, he's right there. I think. Um, yeah, I'm trying to
Because
see if there's a little bit of a
looking
spray
online, I
operation.
don't have all of the. I actually only have my original Mutt and Junk, but from
Okay,
in all of the on the Yojo.com, the Junkyards all look exactly the same,
I believe they are the same mold as far as the dog. I'm
which
looking
is
at the Marauder
a
now.
perfect mold,
It's
by the way.
interesting. Yes, what's interesting about the if you look at the Marauder version and the original, they do flip the artwork. Now, Junkyard,
Oh yeah,
you know,
yeah, you're
so if
right.
you look at he's coming from the other side. Is
I, I got
um,
to be honest. I like the flip version. I like the Marauder version better. I
it is
think
neat because you see more of the dog.
you see
So,
more of the dog. It also creates it creates a flow, like an outer flow from GI Joe swooping down like a left hand,
hmm
like a curve, like a French curve. It makes that French curve on the side of the card into the figure, which when you look at the original, he actually it looks more like he's like blocking the wall. It's actually more. I'm treating this like a comic book now, but it's true. It's like he's supporting the wall, or he's being held back by the wall. And when you look at oh,
hmm
that's interesting. I didn't even notice that. Yeah, but when you look at the other one, because it looks like they've zoomed back a little bit too. They give him a little more shoulder space.
yeah, yeah, you see his full arms there
Yeah.
too. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
that really does look good. And he looks really solid in the Slaughter's Marauders colors. Some of those Marauders colors look a little Neapolitan to me.
yeah,
Don't get me wrong. Some of them look like stripes in the middle of the legs for no reason. It's weird.
yeah. I agree. Yeah, some of those characters. I mean, like I said, I joke, but that's the sad thing. A lot of those subgroups, the
Uh-huh.
original paintings were painted over.
Oh yeah,
So,
that's
yeah,
really sad.
you
Yeah.
think
Do you
you think
have
about some of those.
do you have any of the original paintings? Just
I
random
do
question.
actually.
What's that?
I do.
You do.
I do actually. Yeah, I do.
Awesome.
So, the story we think is that these were originally meant to be painted over Tiger Force. So, there was a gentleman who had a bunch of paintings. I helped kind of broker for him years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to make sure they get in the
Of
hands of good
course.
collectors
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
take care of them. But when it came down to it, when we started realizing who the characters were, I was talking to Pat Stewart, and we were talking, and we kind of realized like a lot of these were the unproduced Tiger Force characters. So you had Rakondo, you had Firefly, you had Ripcord, um, Torpedo. I think were most of the characters, and then there's a couple different vehicles too that they had the Vamp one,
Hmm.
the Fang was one of the paintings. Um, the Ram was another one. So
Wow.
some things never came out in Tiger Force
Mm-hmm.
or Python Patrol. So, um, I mean, I know the Vamp did, but this is the Vamp one.
So then the originals never got painted over.
Yes. So
Oh, nice.
because they kind of probably nixed it at some point, they just never painted over them. So the originals exist of those few characters, which is to me just awesome
That's
because I
really
mean
awesome.
the originals are so beautiful as far as how they're painted.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
but yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
very fortunate with that. So
Now, he went from being the dog handler to the animal
mhm.
control / utilization technician. So he can control the animals and he can use the animals. I like
Apparently,
that. I like that. I like that improvement. By that point, there were more animals in the line. So to just give Mutt oversight, oversight over all of them, I like that. I appreciate it.
for,
Yeah. Um,
definitely.
yeah, I really do think I really do think those colors work on him for what he does.
Yeah, the Marauders. I mean, the whole line. It's not my favorite subgroup, but like him for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're saying, with the
Yeah,
colors that they chose.
and that was just an entire repaint of the original. Although they gave him a different helmet.
Yeah, I'm trying
Am
to
I
see
seeing?
it.
Yeah, his first helmet had like a goggle style on it, according to what I'm seeing here, his helmet for Marauders was a traditional, like early Joe, just regular old helmet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll have to look.
Yeah.
I'll have to see. Mine's in the pack. Mine's at a distance. I can't see it.
You were just going to say mine's still in the package. Oh,
mine's
my
still
God,
in the package, but
listeners, he's got an amazing wall behind him of vintage stuff. This is what you get when you put in the hard work, kids. When you put in the hard work of making G.I. Joe history and bringing G.I. Joe to the masses, you end up with an amazing collection. What came first for you, Dan? An amazing G.I. Joe collection or doing these books?
Collection. I started loose back in '95, and then I was getting such good deals on a lot of carded stuff like Battle Core stuff, and then I bought out a guy's collection who had like 82 to 86. It was kind of mixture. Most of it was carded, but some of them were damaged or had the UPCs cut out, or flag points cut out and stuff. So I've replaced those over the years. But yeah, the carded, and my habits changed where I went to carded. Then I was doing vehicles with figures only. And then I came across a couple collections at that time where they just had the miscellaneous vehicles without a character. So then I became a completist. So by 2000, I'd say 2001, 2002, I essentially had one of everything boxed or carded.
Whoa.
From 82 to 94. So I'm an early bird when it comes to this stuff. I wasn't paying what some of these guys are doing now. But so then the books kind of, I was buying all the, G.I. Joe versus Cobra, Valor versus Venom, Spy Troops. I kept with the completist mentality. At one point I had everything from 82 to probably 2017 or even 18.
Wow.
And then I started kind of unloading stuff. I just needed room. And so I sold the G.I. Joe versus Cobra, except a couple favorites. Same thing with Spy Troops. Same thing with Valor versus Venom. Rise of Cobra, I've sold a pretty decent amount, as well as Retaliation. I still have a lot of that. Still looking to move that. Pursuit of Cobra has always been a favorite. So those I'm keeping.
Listeners, hit Dan up. He's got product to move.
And then exactly. But I just needed room and space, and then I dipped into the pre-production. So now more of a historian, really wanting to preserve the brand, and when I can come across something and afford to to buy it, then I will, and I'll share it in the books, of course, as much as possible. If I haven't already featured it, and then really preserve it again for longevity.
That's really great. Do you get into any of like the India or foreign or Japanese?
I did a little bit back in the early 2000s. I was always a fan of the Brazilian characters. What is it, the Forca de Feira, or I can't remember how you pronounce it, but the ones with the animals. So you have Kangor with the kangaroo. So those four, I was very fortunate a couple years ago. So somebody had them on card. I had them loose, but I wanted them carded because I always, again, love the artwork. And so, because that's really what drew me to collecting. Sorry to go off on a tangent.
No,
but it was the
show is
the artwork.
The show is 100% tangent, Dan. So welcome.
Okay, good. so the artwork what drew me to really get into the carded stuff as well, because again, I was getting good prices on stuff, but I've always loved the package art. That was just something that drew me as a kid.
I agree so much. I think they're so attractive. And I'm like, I've started to get a couple, handful of carded stuff myself. I don't dip into it like you do, but I get them when I can on detail. And I just love the way they look. They just look awesome. And I like the loose figures. I have a nice collection of my original Lucy's and stuff, and I'm filling in the gaps as I go. But I like the look of the carded. It just looks so good. I love looking at them.
It does. I mean, it's beautiful art. I mean, it really is. It really is. I think it's underrated in a lot of ways, from pop culture, I guess you could say, right? People probably don't see toy art.
Listen, but it's so distinctive though. It's so everyone knows what that art looks like. Literally, right before we recorded this, my friend sent over someone online put together Private Pile from Full Metal Jacket in a G.I. Joe card. And
oh wow, okay.
And it looks great because it's it's Vincent D'Onofrio from Full Metal, but it's on a G.I. Joe card, and it says Full Metal Jacket. I don't believe it actually even says G.I. Joe, but it just everyone knows that it's really become a universal
look.
Yeah, like it's got a connotation. I think it's more than He-Man. Like you don't think of the
Mm-hmm.
cards when you think of He-Man. It's close to Star Wars. I think Star Wars probably would be the king of all that.
Mm-hmm.
Like the original black and silver Star Wars. Or it maybe even more than that, even because it lasted longer. Like the
Well,
original
yeah, I mean,
consecutively the originals. But definitely
the
more than
Star Wars. I
Transformers.
mean, yeah, it's interesting in Transformers because I mean, I like a lot of I love a lot of the Transformer stuff too, like
Oh, sure.
design wise. But yeah, I don't know.
But
It's
yeah,
just
the
something with.
Transformers were so big that they are the package, right?
Well,
With
yeah,
GI
yeah,
Joe,
that's
you're
true.
dealing with a smaller product, so the artwork has to stand out more because your figures are so much smaller. So
Definitely.
it's hard to think in Barbie. When you think of Barbie, the same thing where the figure is the package and the color pink, right? But beyond that,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
GI Joe, GI Joe and Star Wars are neck and neck, and then it's just a debate of how much you want to pull out like the overall cultural relevancy and really just get down to the nitty gritty of what makes an action figure card look like. And if you really just get into carding, it might be GI Joe.
Yeah.
I
Well, I
don't know.
think
I'm
Star
just looking
Wars.
to stir up
I
trouble.
mean, oh, there you go. I mean, I'm friends with a lot of Star Wars guys, and and I wasn't really a Star Wars kid.
Uh huh.
I told them, I've told people that like I didn't own Star Wars as a kid. I had GI Joe, He-Man, Transformers. Those was my top three, and then Hot Wheels, Matchbox, that
Yeah,
kind
me
of stuff.
too. Yeah,
But
yeah.
as far as action figures, I just never got in it. My dad wasn't really into that type of stuff, so I don't think I really was introduced to Star Wars when it came out. And you know, a lot of that artwork too is the characters themselves, like the movie characters and
Right.
the actors and stuff. And I mean, of course, it's beautiful packaging. I mean, I love the black that they have. And as far as the Joe packaging, that's one thing I will be talking about. So there's 4 pages dedicated. There's front back of the card, front back of a vehicle. So Grunt is, I think, featured as far as the character, and then a Mobat as far as the vehicle. And interviewed Kirk Bazigian, and we literally went through from top corner all the way around the packaging, explaining all the decisions why they made the decisions they made.
Mm-hmm.
So the verbiage. I mean, I know things changed over time, of course, but on every package, whether it's 82 or I'm looking at 89 or 90, fully posable modern army figure. I mean, it's still the same verbiage throughout the entire series. So there was that consistency throughout.
Mm-hmm.
And so I talk about that. I mean, and simple things like the hanger tag placement. Even that, there's a reason why it's placed where it's at. I mean, it makes sense when you think about it. But, when you're thinking about hanging it at a store, it's going to be off center because of the weight of the characters and the package itself, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
So, things that probably people don't think about. Maybe not Joe people, but people in general, like
Mm-hmm.
product people. So people who go to the store, you pick up something, you probably don't think about what goes into that, a bar soap box or shampoo bottle or whatever. Like there's people behind that making those decisions. Just what we do is a lot more fun.
Yeah, so true.
With GI Joe. So I do cover a lot of that in this upcoming book that's on Kickstarter right now.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah. So remember, kids,
So,
from this episode drops on 4/12. I believe your Kickstarter ends on, is it the 16th?
I think I did it till Monday.
Monday,
because I wasn't sure. Because last time I ran an issue where Kickstarter was slow in approving it, so
got it.
But they start, like, it dipped into my time period as far as the whole Kickstarter. So
Yeah. So that's the 17th.
I think I did it till
so that
Monday.
runs till the 17th. So hopefully, and I'll listeners, don't sleep on this one. Hopefully you're back to listening every Wednesday. You're not catching up when you catch up with it with the with the issues of the comic book. So check it out. And if you miss it though, what's great is you can always go to Steel City Publishing, or was it creatinggijoe.com?
Yeah, creatinggijoe.com. So you can.
And you've got
typically
you've got the books for sale
get them there too.
Yeah, you've got the books for sale there too, which is great.
I was going to say, just generally, for the Kickstarter, I try to, for the bundle package, try to give people a good deal on that, as though they're buying it as though they've been buying it from day one, right? So
I'm glad
I try to keep the price point.
I'm glad you brought that up.
That.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's what I was eyeing up too. From what I can see, I think it's a $65 savings if you go through the Kickstarter to get
so,
all 11 volumes, which is massive.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's pricey. I mean, I get it. Everybody has a budget and stuff, but with the information that you're getting and the pictures and all the imagery, I mean, you're not going to get it anywhere else. I'm very confident in that.
Hasbro approved.
It is Hasbro approved. So, so again, it's a very unique book. It's a very niche book, and I'm aware of that when I look at books. But I,
listen,
I recommend
Dan,
people if you're interested in Joe.
Dan, it's not 1985 anymore. We're all into G.I. Joe. We're all into niche G.I. Joe. It's all niche at this point. Well, getting back to Mutt and Junkyard, we then go to, he's in 92. He's in the Drug Elimination Force, which, if there's anyone, there are two characters from the DEF that make the most sense to me, and it was Cutter and Mutt. Mutt, because he's got the dog, like drug sniffing dog kind of stuff, and Cutter because it's, Coast Guard and, smuggling drugs in and all that stuff. They absolutely made the most sense. Shockwave also really good, and Bulletproof. Yeah. Okay. But Shockwave could be any kind of like urban,
urban assault.
Yeah. The two dudes in the DEF, Mutt and Junkyard and Cutter, made the most sense to be in DEF. And it seems like they carried over so he's got a whole new mold, but they carried over his color scheme from the Marauders for the most part.
Yeah, I don't have that in front of me right now.
Yeah, but that's what I'm looking at. He's got the blue and the green still. He's got like gray or tan pants rather. So it's a different paint application, but it's definitely the same color scheme, but it's a whole new mold, which is interesting. He definitely still he still has his mustache, and he comes with a net launcher, which makes me think he's just catching drug dealers in that net left and right.
Yes. And I mean, and that's the thing, the fun thing about DEF, and I cover some of those characters too. I think it's either this one, or I think it's number 11, the Headhunters. Again, I don't have my stuff in front of me, but
sure.
There's an interesting blurb, is what I call them, that I share out from Larry, because we read the original dossier and what he was talking about and how they were recruiting. It's very interesting. So definitely check that out when you get the newest book. I'm not going to spoil it for anybody.
Okay.
But don't skip over that. Like, what's this about? Read it and then compare it is what I guess I would say. So compare it to, don't just read it and say, I wonder what the original one said. Actually compare them, and you'll see some major differences, which is kind of funny and unique. So
that's a teaser, kids.
There you go. And DEF's an interesting subline because, some of the vehicles weren't necessarily originally made, like the Shark 2000 or the Shark 9000, wasn't initially, DE or it wasn't originally Battle Corps. It was for DEF. Sorry, backwards. So that was actually a DEF vehicle that was supposed to be intended for DEF, but they made that decision to kind of push it out and put it out for Battle Corps instead.
Yeah, well, it looks like Mutt version 4 was similar, where and
there are some characters.
He's the same molds, like he's the same model really as the first, we'll call it the Slaughters Marauders DEF. But the 93 version, he's got kind of an orange cuttery looking. I can't tell if it's orange or red to be honest on my computer. But he's got like a reddish orange vest, green, blue jeans. So he's got a completely different color scheme. But he went under the Battle Corps line.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the fun things you learn too is there's several characters. I mean, not to kind of break away from Mutt, but there's several characters that were intended for DEF but actually got pushed out to Battle Corps. So there's a couple even bad guys as well as good guys. And so I think I have shots of the original proofs to kind of show you like, hey, this is what they would have looked like on, the DEF card. If my memory serves me correct, it was a little bit thinner originally, and then it became kind of like the fatter card, I guess you can call it. Most likely due to the accessories and the spring loaded and just, giving the firing weapons. But yeah, with Mutt, I mean, it was fun to see a different mold and different look to him rather than just keep rehashing the same old look over the years. I mean, the classified that they're coming up with, I'm excited. I don't know what it looks like, but I'm really excited about him. I'm going to probably buy multiple, which I shouldn't do, but I probably will
hey,
do.
man, you gotta get one to open, one to keep box, and then another one to open and play with, and there's all these rules you got to explain to your significant other.
Exactly.
What I find interesting is the Battle Core version, which is the Mutt V4. The artwork, talking about artwork, they didn't paint over to match his new colors. They used the same artwork, same color scheme as was on his V3, the original DE.
Yeah, they did that for several characters.
Yeah.
So,
is that just a matter of like labor and not wanting to sink too much money into it at that point?
yeah, probably cost savings,
right.
if I had to guess. I mean, I think Alley Viper is another one. I think I'm trying to think, at least the back of the packaging I was looking at the other day. I think the yellow version is still on the back of the orange version that came out in 93, 94, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think the cost, the save money.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They just utilize the same artwork, and so I try to do that within the book. So even though I'm featuring, I think I did that for Roadblock from 92. It's essentially the same artwork for 93, and so instead of trying to break it up, I will show all the variants that I have at least. So I'm trying to think of some other characters right now that's in the upcoming book, but if I have different variants, like Flag, he has the black jacket and then he has the brown jacket. So I try to show both versions. That way people can see the variants. I don't go super crazy, but
yeah. What stands out with Mutt, he's one of those characters that the original design was so great and also classic and burned in our brains that any redesign of him, with no shade at all to the V3, V4, and, you fast forward 10 years and you get a 2004 version, things like that. If it's not his original style, he doesn't look right. Like he looks good, but he doesn't look like Mutt because that original version was so good. Versus someone like, I think, General Hawk, where they nail it on the second go with General Hawk versus Hawk. And then that version of General Hawk with the bomber jacket is so great that almost any variation on that is I'm not as interested in.
Yeah, there's I think that happens for some characters.
Yeah.
If you look at Grunt, for example, right?
Yeah.
The original Grunt is iconic. I mean, that's just an iconic.
He's the logo. Yeah.
He is, exactly. Where even Kurt Groen, who designed the later version, wasn't that excited about it. He even shared it. He goes, "This wasn't my favorite." And so, they have their favorites and they have their, least favorites. Sometimes some of the decisions they had to make, on color schemes especially, were, decided by marketing. They wanted the more brilliant colors in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't always mean the designer originally designed them to be that way. And hence why they do a lot of color studies. But yeah, so
a lot of it, it's not even. Sometimes it's not even color. Sometimes it's literally just like the way they look. Like he's got the mustache and he's got this, but you go, nah, it doesn't feel right. Roadblock's a good example too of one of those guys where the second go around ends up being his go-to look for he's had a few iterations, but what do they do when they do classified? They do the V2 look.
Exactly.
They do the
exactly. So
V2.
I mean, look at Snake Eyes. Yep. I mean, as popular as version 1 is, we all know version 2 is what's going to be featured in any movie or anything like that.
Exactly. So, version 2 and or just elements of version 2 with different variations of pouches.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so true. It's great, man. And then so they did, like we said, they did Junkyard and Mutt and Junk in 2004, a couple versions in 2005 and 8 and all that stuff. And we're doing some classified, but we're focusing on the O-rings here, and he's just he's really good. I've been making, listeners, if you haven't been following me on Instagram, etc., I've been making G.I. Joe skins for the WWE 2K23 wrestling game. And
I've been seeing that.
Yeah, and Dan, I got to tell you, before you even called this, I had just started on a Mutt figure for it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to get him finished this week. So I'm excited to do it. I was like, okay, we're going to tackle Mutt. We're going to do him as best as I can and get him in the game. So listeners, if you got WWE 2K23 I'm on PlayStation. I don't know if the skins cross over to Xbox, but if they do hashtag Joe on Joe, and you'll find all those fun skins, and it's hilarious to watch the G.I. Joes. I'll put it on autoplay. I don't even need to play the game. I just watch G.I. Joes run around the ring and beat the crap out of each other.
Beat each other up.
It's very humorous.
That's the fun thing too with these, with color studies. For customizers, for people who are customizers, the books are great in the sense of, I want to see such and such in this color. And that's, with the HasLab, his tank, and the tactician, right?
Mm-hmm.
That whole, I can't, verify, but I don't know where else they would have seen the color studies, but most likely came from the book because they saw the different color studies for the His driver and ran with it, and, I provided them some artwork. They needed some artwork for the original, but it's really neat to see that they referenced the book in some way, and then Ron Rudat, of course, getting the credit that he should be getting,
richly
and
deserves.
being part of that, and being part of that whole process.
Yeah, and that's always a good sign that I enjoy in seeing in things like the comic books and offshoots and things like that, when the writers, artists, when they reference this stuff and they do the deep pulls. I've been reading some of the G.I. Joe versus Cobra comics that came out in the mid-teens, that were from the Joe Fest stuff, and they've got all the deep cut references to alt versions of figures and all that stuff. And I think that's a lot of fun in the minutia. And if you pull it off well, it makes it intriguing for a new fan to seek out, why is he wearing this color outfit? What's that mean? And, and rewarding for the old fan who remembers, I used to wear an orange vest,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, you can have a lot of fun with that. And I always love seeing customs people do, whether it be, especially your Vipers, when I featured a Viper, I have a couple different color studies of the Viper himself. And so, it'd be awesome to see some people do some different customs, whether it be vintage O-ring or even a modern, classified stuff.
For sure.
Just rehashing them and doing them in different color schemes to match some of the potential colors, and that's the whole purpose of it. Just pitch it and see what color gets chosen or what look. But I love that part too.
Now, Dan, do you get into the comic books and like the novels and all that side stuff, or are you a toy guy only?
I'm toy primarily. I do have some comic stuff. I need to read all the comics, to be honest with you.
Because Mutt made his first appearance in G.I. Joe 25.
Yes.
And it was awesome. So, they were in the swamps hunting Zartan. And that first issue ends with Destro about to put one right through Junkyard's eyes.
Yes. So I have some comic stuff. I think with that issue, sorry. I think I do have. It's like a Xerox copy, but it's like the pencils of the Xerox.
Oh,
copy.
really?
Oh, wow. Xerox copy of the pencils. Yeah. So I do have some cool stuff like that. I at one point had a bunch of that, which I helped sell for somebody in a sense of. They had the black and white inks. And again, these are all Xerox copies from back in the day. And then they had black and white copies of the pencils. And sometimes there were notes. And what was cool to see is some of the changes that you would see. So like issue 1, there's a couple things, with some of the pages were different, or like the vamp was, about to flip over on this page, but they redid it. And so it doesn't look like it's on its side essentially or whatnot. So, so small changes that were made, but I've combed through that as well. So that's one thing I enjoy doing.
Yeah. We need to get a proper artist edition for G.I. Joe. I know we got the Michael Golden kind of a portfolio collection, which is lovely. Don't get me wrong, but I would love to see a full on proper, like artist edition of, if not one artist, but at least of a smattering of eras of G.I. Joe artists. I think that would be really great. Maybe you can help them out. Maybe you can help them out with some of this archival scans and stuff.
Yeah. I've thought, I pitched a couple of different ideas, over the years.
Yeah.
In regards to the comic and stuff, but it just depends on who has the license for the comic itself.
Oh, for sure.
IDW at the time. I talked to a few people over there, but never really got off the ground. But you never know.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll see what the
Life
new
is long.
whoever's. Yeah.
What I really dug about in the comic book, and they play it up in the show too with Mutt and Junk, is while Junkyard is 100% loyal, he's also his own man. So like in that issue, he defies Mutt and runs up to Zartan's hut. He would do it on the show occasionally too, and there was always this it was like The Odd Couple, but between a man and a dog. That was always my take on it. Like, he was they're an old married couple, and Mutt would just get constantly frustrated by a Junkyard going off and doing his own thing, but it was always the right thing to do.
Yeah. Being protector of them, and I have 2 dogs now, and we have a puppy, and he does the same things.
Awesome.
Love him to death, but he doesn't listen.
Did you name him Junkyard, and did you name him Junkyard
not.
and or Order?
No. The wife won't. It's not a Rottweiler, and I don't know. The wife would go for that one, but
I'll tell you,
I've always wanted a Rottweiler though. So
I think if you ever do, you have to name him. You have to name him Junk, or at least JY.
Oh, for sure.
They're great, and I've said it before on the show. I love animals with G.I. Joes. I love Polly. I love Junkyard. Order was great in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's of course Freedom, and obviously Timber is amazing.
And then Croc Masters, Croc,
of course.
And, Raptors, Bird.
Yep. Did Voltar have a vulture?
Yes. And then the boar was the best with Naugahyde. That was always a fave. So I'll share this since we're on animals. There was a character that was supposed to come with an animal but did not. So it's in one of the earlier books, but I won't share who it is.
Oh.
Or do you want to know who it is?
Yeah, it's good. Tease it out. Come on.
All right. So read Alpine.
Was he supposed to have a billy goat?
No. So I won't tell you what it is.
But Alpine was supposed to have an animal.
Yes. I'm not now. I'm second guessing. Was it Alpine? I'm 99% sure it's Alpine.
Well, that animal companion morphed into Bazooka, and I think we're all the better for it.
Exactly. There you go. But yeah, he was supposed to have an animal. It would have been an interesting animal to have. But yeah, check it out. I mean, those are the little things. So one thing I also have been very fortunate to have is some information like from original memos. And so I'll comb through that information and I'll point out different decos or information like that. Maybe this is supposed to come with an animal, or whatever the case it may be, as far as a difference or a feature, or I try to point out all that information. So that's another fun thing I enjoy. And see, how I did it though is overwhelm myself. I would only research the characters I knew were going to be in that upcoming volume, right? So I didn't until the latest ones, when I was trying to figure out spacing. But up until number 11, really, I didn't want to read too much into it, because then I didn't want to lose that drive and that interest and that excitement, because I get excited when I come across something. There's alternate heads, which I won't go into too much detail, but for 83, they were going to redo some of the heads from 82. 2 of the heads were already known. The guys who did Declassified or do Declassified, they announced 2 of the heads that were going to be redecoed, and they had pictures and stuff. But once I read a memo that I had received, I realized that there's a 3rd head. And so that was kind of a fun discovery that nobody had known about. And so I feature that character as well. And I think volume 2, where I showcase, hey, this is a character that was going to have a new head for 83, but they never did it. So that's kind of a fun tidbit of history as well.
Well, listeners, if that's not enough to wet your whistle, pique your interest, dot your T's and cross your I's, to check out Dan Klingensmith Jr.'s Creating G.I. Joe Kickstarter, I don't know what is, because there's all kinds of great stuff wrapped up in there. You certainly don't have to commit to all 11 volumes. You certainly can get just the one. He's got levels for just getting the most recent 3, things like that. So there's something for everyone.
Yeah. So if you don't want to do the whole thing, that's, it's understandable. You go to the website, like I said, creatinggijoe.com. You can purchase them individually there. Some people have done that just to kind of, like you said, just test the waters, I guess, and see if it's something of interest, and then come back and purchase the rest. So
awesome.
Yeah,
love it.
So,
well, Dan, thanks for joining me to talk both Kickstarter and everyone's favorite dog handler, Mutt and Junkyard.
Yes. I should have been more versed with my knowledge on
how many mutts do you think you have?
I have at least 2 carded ones. I still have my original one from my childhood.
Uh-huh.
He and Flint actually were found by my dad. They got buried at some point. And when I was a young adult, I want to say teenager or older teenager, for Christmas one year, that's what I got was my original Joes, because I thought I lost them. I've written it off at that point. And so he found them in the yard somehow, and they're beat up, but they're my originals. So I have a couple loose ones, a couple carded ones, but he's always a favorite, and
love it.
Again, that original version is my favorite,
yeah,
of course.
He's so great
when it comes down to it.
Well, this has been a tremendous conversation, Dan. Thanks for joining us this week on You on Joe.
I appreciate it. I appreciate the invite, and hopefully some people will check it out, and look forward to getting the books out to you very soon. It's definitely something, I don't know if your listeners know, but I take great pride in the turnaround time for my books. They're already to Hasbro now as far as the approval process. My printer is waiting for me to get that, and then I'll send over my files for the proof. So I hope to be shipping these out probably mid-May. So it's a very quick turnaround when it comes to Kickstarter. So for people maybe are used to waiting a year or 2 or whatever, I generally try to get out within a month or 2 of the Kickstarter, if not sooner. It just depends on when it funds and stuff. So
it's called integrity, listeners, and I appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
Now we know more about Mutt and Junkyard, and joeing is half the battle.